Welcome to Global Kinship, exploring the emerging noosphere. My name is Bob Eisenberger. I join Penny Andrews and Gail Ransom each month to prepare these webinars for you. Together, we are tracking the creative intelligence of humanity as it weaves itself into a global consciousness that has been named the noosphere by Pierre Desjardins, Brian Swimme, and others. Nous, Greek for mind, and sphere for the layer of consciousness that is surrounding and interacting with the other layers on this planet, the biosphere and the geosphere. Today, we are participating in this developing new sphere, intent on participating in a global change of consciousness. Our guest today is Dr. Ursula Goodenough, PhD, an evolutionary biologist whose life is a testament to the increasing capacity of the human mind. Today, we will also take a moment to honor Michael Dowd, a champion of sustainable evolution and a recent guest on this webinar. He passed away unexpectedly on October 7th. And before I turn over to Penny, just a couple of housekeeping notes, if you will. We ask that everyone keep yourself muted, unless except when you're asking a question, when that time comes. And we also ask when you do have questions to ask at that time, that you find the reactions button on your Zoom toolbar and click click raise hand, which will indicate to all of us, and that'll put you in a line, we'll get you in sequence. If you would like, if you have a question during the actual talk, feel free to record it in the chat box as a way to hold that question in your own mind, and also to let everybody else know what question we're going to be responding to later. All right, so at this point, I will turn over to Penny.
Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here again. Some of you may remember our first iteration as Elder Interviews. It was a great series. Some of these are online on YouTube, and we had wonderful folks, including Jeremy Taylor and Larry Edwards, folks that we knew through University of Creation Spirituality and beyond, but who had things to share. And then we became Creation in Crisis, and with us was not Bob, but John Robinson, and someone you might remember. John made an intentional choice to do what they do in India, which is to withdraw from the world and really take in the present moment, every moment, without plans. But being John continued to write, and he's moved into writing poetry now and has a new book coming out very shortly. We'd like to open with one of his poems called The End of Questions. So invite your breath, allow yourself to slow down to this present moment as I read. We often ask questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? No other animals ask such questions. But here's the ultimate answer. Happiness and enlightenment are found when we stop asking questions and return attention to the radical present. Like flower, orca, and sky, we fulfill our role in the cosmos by simply being part of the divinity of what is. And that's a perfect segue to remember Michael Dowd, because that's where Michael landed. If his name is new to you, Michael was an itinerant preacher. He started as an evangelical preacher, but he was too earthy for the church and was booted out. Then he got religion on the story of the universe, as expressed by Thomas Berry and Brian Swim, and traveled to share the good news as of our role as stardust and made manifest in human form. Our job was to celebrate the miracle of life, and celebrate Michael did. Then he found William Catton's unflinching book on overshoot and collapse, which is the inevitable process for a top dog species, as he would call it. In his insatiable search for answers, he found the literature on the rise and fall of civilizations, including the book by Sir John Glubb called The Fate of Empires, explaining that we are in the process of collapse. His huge evangelical heart, combined with his understanding of God as the evolving universe, our home, and his acceptance that we are not going to wheedle our way out of this unraveling. And so he came to accept this collapse, this great turning, with the grace of accepting our own mortality. This is the good news in the bad news world, as he called it. Beyond the wrenching grief, there is a joy just in the glory of the living world, the living universe. There is praise and thanksgiving and unfettered love for being part of it all. And I personally had a number of interactions with Michael, and he did give this unfettered love to every moment. And I am so grateful he was with us when he was, and his websites and his webinars will continue to guide us as we move forward into what is to come. But thank you, Michael. Gone too soon, but lived large. So with that, I turn it over to Gail Ransom.
Well, I know I'm looking forward to introducing Ursula Goodenough, but I know she also had something she wanted to say about Michael. So, Ursula.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I knew Michael for many decades. My first encounter was via Connie Barlow, who was his wife for many decades, and she and I were very early on thinking about articulating what we're now calling the religious naturalist orientation. So Connie was a dear friend, and then she brought this guy who she then married after a divorce from her first husband, and he was just out there. He was a force of nature. He never stopped talking. He never stopped thinking. It just was, when Michael was in the room, that was who was in the room. And I say that in the most honorific way. It wasn't that he was trying to dominate. It's just that Michael dominated. He was always thinking ahead to the next thing. And I'm going to miss him terribly. He wrote a wonderful blurb for my book. We've just been working side by side ever since I first knew him. And his death is a tragedy, but his life is a huge gift to us all.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to hear how you luminaries interact. So let me introduce you to today's luminary. Ursula Goodenough was professor of biology emerita at Washington University, where her research focused on genetics, cell biology, and evolution. She is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a member of the National Academy of Sciences. She and others are developing what they call a religious naturalist orientation, which holds that the beauty, wonder, and scientific understandings of nature are essential foundations for our pursuit of personal wholeness, social coherence, and planetary sustainability. She has just recently published a new edition of her best-selling book, The Sacred Depths of Nature, this year. It describes her understanding of this religious naturalism. Her first book was in 1998 and was a big bestseller. Everyone was touched by it. She had so much response. So she now has retired to Chilmark, Martha's Vineyard, in 2017, and she has 5 children and 9 grandchildren. Welcome, Ursula.
Thank you, Gail. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will now see how we rehearsed this once before, so let's hope it's all going to happen. Yes, all right. So does that show?
Perfect.
Yep, that's fine.
Looks good?
Good.
Okay. So there's a little your screen share. Wow, there's a little thingy on the top. Can you get rid of that, Bob, or is that there? Anyway.
I'm not seeing it.
Oh, it says your screen sharing stop share. It's a little bar across the top. Anyway, I won't worry about it. So good afternoon. Here's an outline of my talk. I'm first going to provide my understanding of religious naturalist orientation. And to do that, I'm going to ask what is meant by being religious, what is meant by naturalist, and what happens when the two are combined. And then, as Gail said, I have given my version of this orientation in The Sacred Depths of Nature. So I'm going to walk through this book and show images from the book and then read passages from the book. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't like to hear someone reading on a screen, it drives some people crazy, just close your eyes and listen. So let's talk first about who we are. We are, of course, animals, but we are also distinctive in that we are symbolic and narrative beings. So symbolic refers to the fact that while all animals communicate, and probably most beings communicate in some way, we do so via this means called symbolic language. And this allows us to convey ideas and to write books and to construct civilizations. So these symbols point to underlying meanings and understandings. So you can say apple, and then this connotes all sorts of additional things besides just the fruit. And we organize and remember these understandings in language-based narratives and stories. So we are storytellers first and foremost. And in fact, this is, I think, the key feature of who we are as humans. And because we construct stories, we also construct a story about ourselves. So we have what we call an I self that wakes up in the morning and goes to sleep at night, and yada, 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 that we try to make go away when we're engaged in meditative practice, but it pops right back up. We just tell ourselves a story about ourselves throughout our lives. So Terry Deacon has summarized our distinctiveness in this pithy quote: biologically, we are just another ape. Mentally, we are a whole new phylum of organism. So one of the things that humans have done throughout history is to come up with religious traditions, estimated 4,000 or 5,000 of them. And each of these religious traditions has a core narrative, a mythos, or a large story. And each mythos has tells us how things are, which things matter, how things came to be. And if you go back to your religion of origin, you can think of the life of Christ or the life of Buddha, stories everywhere. And then we approach these stories in 3 distinctive ways. We first ask, what does this story mean? How do we interpret it? And these interpretations are often embedded in the mythos itself and then elaborated by religious leaders. Secondly, we develop spiritual responses to the story, to the mythos. And these are typically elicited by art, ceremony, dance, ritual. And again, these are typically administered by religious leaders. And finally, moral or ethical edicts are built into the fabric of the mythos and elaborated again by religious leaders. So we have meaning to our story, spiritual responses, and moral and ethical responses. So, as I don't need to tell this group, scientific inquiry has provisioned us with a mind-blowing new core narrative. And Loyal Ruse summarizes it in this pithy quote: during the course of epic events, matter was distilled out of radiant energy, segregated into galaxies, collapsed into stars, fused into atoms, swirled into planets, spliced into molecules, mutated into species, compromised into thoughts, and cajoled into cultures. All of this is what matter has done as systems upon systems of organization have emerged over 13 billion years of creative natural history. So we've come to call this story everybody's story because it is everybody's story and has been gleaned via scientific inquiry throughout the world. And I would say that someone is a vanilla naturalist who takes this story to mind, who understands it, is interested in it, and lives in its context. So we go on to say that a religious naturalist also explores everybody's story for its religious potential and does so along the same three axes: the interpretive, the spiritual, and the moral. So a religious naturalist takes nature to mind and takes nature to heart. So a little plug, a bunch of us, there are well over 1,000 of us now, have come together and formed something called the Religious Naturalist Association. Here's the URL, and you can find it in Google. And what's important to stress is that there isn't a religious naturalism. There are many different RN voices, and some use theistic language. And Mary Jane Rubenstein has written a wonderful book called Pantheologies that I encourage you to check out, because she talks about all the various ways that pantheism writ large has been articulated in our cultural histories. But my contribution and my approach in writing my book, The Sacred Depths of Nature, is what I call non-theistic. So here is the book cover, and here are its 13 chapters. The origins of Earth, the origins of life, how life works, how an organism works, how evolution works, the evolution of biodiversity, awareness and the I self, interpretations and feelings, sex, intimacy, multicellularity and death, human evolution and human morality, and eco-morality. And for each chapter, most of the chapter, I present our science-based understandings as clearly and openly as I'm capable, so assuming that my reader is not a scientist or necessarily very deeply scientifically informed. But I go ahead and talk about it. I don't skim it over, because I think that all things that we understand about the natural world and about beings is fascinating and deeply enriching. And at the end of each chapter, I then offer a few paragraphs that I call reflections where I give my own personal, usually spiritual take on the material that I have just presented in the chapter. And as I now walk through the book with you, I will be reading and I will talk about what's in the chapter, but what I'll be reading are paragraphs from these various reflections. Okay, so let's jump right in. Chapter 1, the origins of the universe. So the universe, Big Bang, all of the things that I'm sure you are at least familiar with, occurred before Earth showed up about 4.5 billion years ago. And I tell the story of being a young, I guess it was in my early 20s, of first taking in these understandings of the universe and how large and old and crazy it is, and feeling a great deal of terror, basically, which some of you may have encountered yourselves. And my reflection on that goes as follows. After the terror, when I later encountered the famous quote from physicist Steven Weinberg, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it seems pointless," I wallowed in its poignant nihilism. But since then, I have found a way to defeat the nihilism that lurks in the infinite and the infinitesimal. I've come to understand that I can deflect the apparent pointlessness of it all by realizing that I don't need to seek a point in any of it. Instead, I can see it as the locus of mystery. The mystery of why there is anything at all rather than nothing. The mystery of where the laws of physics come from. The mystery of why the universe seems so strange. Mystery, inherently shrouded in its own absence of category, its own absence of an answer. Mystery generates wonder, and wonder generates awe. The gasp can terrify, or the gasp can emancipate. As I dwell within cosmic and quantum mystery, I wander back through the centuries and encounter the essence of Lao Tzu. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees the manifestations. These two spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. Okay, next chapter, the origins of life. So the life originated, the current thinking goes, it might have originated in these deep sea vents where water is, gas seeps out of the mantle and heats up the water and creates a condition where chemistry can occur. And in a model that I show called the autocatalytic cycle on the top right, the idea is that what happened is that entities that are labeled A, B, and C in the diagram serve as catalysts. Catalyst promotes a chemical reaction. And in this diagram, on the top left, we have two little circles, meaning some sugars that are created in these deep sea vents that are brought together by the catalyzed by catalyst C to form catalyst A. And catalyst A then takes the two little squares and creates catalyst B. And B catalyzes the diamonds to make C. And C then goes and makes more A. And you have this cycle of making more and more of these catalysts. The idea then is drawn more with better images in the lower part. And what is also done here is right at the top of the diagram, there's a little triangle labeled F. That's one of the catalysts that's created in this in these cycles. But it's a multitasker. Not only does it serve as a catalyst, it also serves as it also joins together to form a little capsid that puts the various catalysts inside. And this allows the catalyst to be to move through time and to not be dissipated from one another. And this little critter that looks a lot like a virus down at the bottom, Terry Deacon calls an autogen. Now, the autogen is a hypothesis. There's no evidence that such anything that looked like that or whatever existed. But this kind of thinking helps me, and I hope you, to understand that the formation of life can be thought of as chemistry catalyzed in cyclical fashion. And in fact, the first person who came up with this idea was a very wonderful scientist named Francisco Varela. What we have happening here then is a very important general concept, which is called emergence, where there's something else from nothing but. So the nothing buts in our top drawing are the catalysts and the substrates, the little sugars or whatever coming in from the ocean. But what we get is something else. We get the property of catalysis, we get a cycle, we get properties and dynamics that are emergent from these smaller entities. And what I do throughout the book is continue to stress that emergence, this property, ability to come up with new things, is, I would say, nature's mode of creativity. This is how you get from something that's nothing more than this little autogen to animals and humans and everything else. So here's a reflection on all of this. The origin of life has long been considered a miracle wrought by gods or God or spirits. Now life can be understood as the perhaps inevitable consequence of our entangled thermal and chemical context, our planetary matrix, that fostered and continues to foster life's emergent properties and emergent dynamics. Miracle, from the Latin miraculum, in fact means an object of wonder. We can gasp in wonder at the miraculous origin of life without the need to invoke supernatural design or agency. Each life form, even one of those autogens, is a self, and each self has aims, has a purpose: to self-maintain, self-protect, self-repair, and self-reproduce. And I talk about how the autogen can do all of those things. In many religious contexts, purpose is spelled with a capital P, as in, what is the purpose of my life? The religious naturalist instead joins East Asian and indigenous religions in dwelling in a lowercase understanding of purpose. The exuberant, purposive dynamics that spring forth from every creature, every self, and infuse our every moment. So, how life works. The big players in life, in addition to DNA and RNA that have the information, but the players are usually proteins. So in the upper left, we see a portion of an antibody protein interacting with the spike protein of a COVID virus. So that's a right at home understanding or familiarity of proteins doing their thing. Beneath it is a diagram of an enzyme that is performing catalysis. So you remember we had those imaginary catalysts in our origin of life. Proteins now serve as catalysts to cause chemical or enable chemical reactions to happen. In this case, it's bringing sugars together in its little pocket and allowing them to form bonds between them to form larger sugars. So enzymes as catalysts have gone throughout the 3.5 billion year history of life and are ubiquitous. And what they catalyze is what we now call metabolism. And here is a chart of the metabolism that goes on in the human. And as you can see, there are gazillions of things happening inside of every cell in your body, and thousands of enzymes that catalyze these various reactions to form the materials that make up your cells and your body and you. Reflection. We're told that life is so many manifestations of biophysics and biochemistry, and many of us shudder, a long existential shudder. And then we defend. We dig in our heels and say, no, that can't be all it is. That does to life what astrophysics does to the night sky. Life reduced to its component molecules is life demeaned. Stop saying things like that. For me, a helpful way to think about such reductionism is to invoke what we can call the Mozart metaphor. A Mozart piano sonata is a wondrous thing, beautiful beyond belief, sonorous, resonant, transporting. But it is also about notes and piano keys. Mozart's magnificent brain conceived the work, to be sure. He then transcribed it into black specks on white paper to be translated into strings hit by tiny hammers to create vibrations heard by ears. We can thrill to a sonata without giving a thought to its notes, but we can also open up a score and follow the notes or play them ourselves without having the music diminished or demeaned. It is another way of experiencing the whole, and indeed, the only way to have a full understanding of what the sonata entails and what Mozart had in his mind. So back to emergence, something else from nothing but. The notes are hammered by the piano keys, nothing but, and out flows the sonata, something else. Our attention might focus downward on the genome sequence of a wild rose, nothing but, and then shift upward to take in some emergent flowers, something else, and then go back down to the cytoplasmic compartments of the flower, swollen with red pigment, nothing but, to give the petals their flush, something else. We reduce to understand the players, and then synthesize to understand their emergent properties and dynamics, and then find another occasion to reduce. How did Mozart generate that modulation into B flat? With that chord. How lovely. How organisms work. So organisms are two types, single-celled, like the upper left, which is an amoeba, or multi-celled, like some fungi and all land plants and animals, where they start with an embryo, and at the bottom we have a sea urchin embryo that's divided twice to yield 4 cells, and will go on to be a mature sea urchin. And on the right, I talk about a very important feature of all organisms that are alive today, and that is that they are aware. They're aware of their environment, and they do so by being the membranes around each cell or around um, around each cell are studded with proteins that are called receptors. So receptors is this thing that looks like a wrench. And it has a pocket that is looking for something. So this little blue guy fits into the pocket. And when it fits into the pocket, the protein changes its shape and creates in panel C a pocket on the other side, on the inside of the cell. And a green round thing can fit into that pocket, and it fits in. There's a catalysis, and the green guy changes his shape, now gets ears, and it goes on to then influence the next thing, much like those metabolic diagrams that we just saw, where everything goes from one thing to the next to the next. And if this receptor is a receptor looking for something to smell, then the blue would be some sort of odorant, and what would happen is that the organism would detect the odor of the blue substrate. So awareness is key, and we'll get back to that later. I've come to understand that the self, myself, is inherently sacred by virtue of its own improbability, its own miracle, its own emergence. I start with my egg cell, one of 400,000 in my mother's ovaries, each one of them different. It meets with one of the hundreds of millions of different kinds of sperm cells produced each day by my father. Astonishing that I happened at all, truly astonishing. And then I cleave, I implant in her uterus, I grow tiny fetal kidneys and a tiny heart. The genes of my father and the genes of my mother switch on and off and on again in all sorts of combinations, all sorts of chords and tempos, to create something both eminently human and eminently new. Once I am born, my unfinished brain slowly completes its maturation in the context of my unfolding experience. And during my quest to understand what it is to be a person, I come to understand that there can be but one me. And so I lift up my head and I bear my own witness with affection and tenderness and respect. And in so doing, I sanctify myself with my own grace. To the extent that I know myself, I am known. Any yearnings to be capital K known are relegated to the corridors of arrogance. And I sing my own song with profound gratitude for my existence. How evolution works. So we start with the planetary matrix that began to form 4.7 billion years ago. And it took about 1 billion years for the Earth to settle down and acquire an atmosphere and acquire its layers and all the other things that happened before anything that we could call life originated. But at some point, and one guess is about 3.7 billion years ago, a proto-life form showed up, which we've modeled as that autogen. And that proto-life form, because it could reproduce, started getting new ideas, new substrates coming in, new ways of negotiating the matrix. And most of those ideas didn't work out. Those red no-go signs. But what is very clear is that one lineage kept going until we get to about 3 billion years ago, where we now have a blue creature that is nicknamed the Luca for the last universal common ancestor. And it's a common ancestor because it gave rise to the 3 huge major groups of organisms that populate the planet today. One group is called the archaea. They're very tiny little guys. Another is called the bacteria, which you're more familiar with, but they're also tiny little single-celled guys. And at some point, the archaea and the bacteria actually merge together to form a new lineage called the eukaryotes. And that's what we are. Most eukaryotes are single-celled, like that amoeba we saw earlier, but some eukaryotes came to be multicellular, and that's who we are. So what happened then is that the biodiversity of the current planet is now increasingly understood, doing the remarkable breakthrough of sequencing genomes. And what this image shows is on the top, the big flower, the bacteria, and at the bottom, about 6 o'clock, the archaea, the various kinds of archaea and bacteria that arose from the leuca, where the leuca you could think of as being right at the node between those two. And off to the right, at 5 o'clock, are the eukaryotes, but in this image, they've been squinched down to so that we can fully admire what the bacteria have come up with. And the archaea to a lesser extent. They haven't been, as far as we know, as pervasive, but there are bacteria everywhere on the planet. And of course, as you know, as many bacteria in your body as there are your own cells. So if we next look at this image, in this case, the bacteria and the archaea have been squinched down to a little group at 5 o'clock in the first upper left-hand circle. And the rest of them are all of the various lineages of the eukaryotes. And so we have protists, we have plants, we have fungi, and we have animals up at 10 o'clock. And what these illustrators have done is taken this circle and enlarged it. So in the upper right is an enlargement of the upper sector, showing the animal radiation. And now you can read that sign that says, "You are here." If you go down to the lower left, it's enlarged again. "You are here." And finally, it's at a place where we can actually read it. And there it says, Homo sapiens. And to our right are a mouse and the rat, and to our left are 2 amphibians. So the eukaryotes have radiated in all sorts of ways to make all sorts of creatures, and we are a very, very tiny branch of the whole. I walk through the woods and the creatures are everywhere, seen and unseen, flying about or pushing through the soil or rummaging under the leaf litter, adapting and interacting and reproducing. I open my senses to them and we connect. I don't need to anthropomorphize them, nor to value them because they are beautiful or amusing or needed for my survival. I see them as they are. I understand how they work. I think about their genes switching on and off, their cells dividing and differentiating in pace with my own, homologous to my own. I take in the sycamore by the river, and I think about its story, the ancient versions of algae and mosses and ferns that came before, the tiny first life form that gave rise to it and to me. I try to guess why it looks the way it does, why the leaves are so serrated and the bark so white, and imagine all sorts of answers, all manner of selections and adaptations that have yielded this tree to existence, and hence to my experience. Blessed be the tie that binds. It anchors us. We are embedded in the great story of biological evolution, the spare, elegant process of mutation and selection and bricolage, and this means that we are anything but alone. Awareness and the I self. So, as we said earlier, all organisms, bacteria, archaea, eukaryotes, single-celled, multi-celled, they're all aware of their environment and one another and their mates. Awareness is a key feature of being alive. And in the eukaryotic lineage and then in the animal lineage, a particular organ showed up called the brain, which is sort of the focus of awareness in all animals. And on the right, we see the evolution of the brain from the fish on the top to the human on the bottom, where an obvious thing that's happened is that the cerebrum has greatly enlarged and the prefrontal cortex, but it's all, as is the case, and I emphasize this throughout the book, in evolution, what you do is you take what you have and you elaborate it and deepen it, but you use the same parts over and over again. And that has certainly been the case with minds. So we have these animals with minds. And then as I started out, we as humans developed the capacity to use and understand symbolic language, to tell ourselves and each other infinite numbers of stories, to imagine stories that haven't even happened. We can do all sorts of cool stuff. And one of them, again, repeating, is that we construct this story about ourselves, our I self, that we elaborate throughout our lives. As a non-theistic religious naturalist, I call upon the concept of emergence to help me understand the widespread sense that humans have immaterial souls that can interact with immaterial spirits and can continue their existence after the death of the body. The emergentist approach suggests that to experience our experience without perceiving its underlying material mechanisms, the neural hormonal collaborations, is the kind of thing one might expect of emergent dynamics. While the outcome has been given reverent names like spirit or soul that conjure up the apparent absence of materiality, we need not interpret this as evidence of some parallel immaterial world. We can now say that the experience of soul or spirit as immaterial is a reflection of the way the process of emergence distances each new level from the details below, the nothing buts below. Given such understandings, I have no qualms about referring to my sense of myself as my soul. A soul emergent from material and biological complexity, a soul that will die when my body dies, but nonetheless a soul provisioned with endless opportunities for what some call imminent experience and others describe as a fullness, an overwhelming richness. The concept that these experiences entail access to some independent spiritual realm doesn't resonate with me. Whereas to think of the mystical dimension as emergent from my mind and heart makes it all the more wondrous and exciting to be a human. I am called to access the mysticism inherent in my participation in the planetary matrix. Interpretation and feeling. So this is a long chapter on how minds work, how we interpret things, and how every thought that we have is infused with a feeling. They all go together in our minds and in all animal minds. A feeling state that accompanies most religious frames of mind is variously called empathy, compassion, humaneness, or loving kindness. The ability to imagine what it is like for another being to feel distress, the ability to put oneself in another's shoes and experience their distress in one's own being, and the impulse to help ameliorate that distress. Empathy has deep roots. Versions of empathy have often been witnessed in other mammals and in birds, and are particularly evident in non-human apes. A young bonobo was observed to fatally injure a bird while playing with it. She picked up the comatose body, carried it with her to the top of a tree, and opened out her hand. When the bird still lay there limply, she wrapped her legs around the tree trunk, held the bird by its wings, and then opened and closed the wings several times, apparently trying to help it start to fly. It is as we can imagine being the least of these that we can begin to experience the anguish of poverty or deprivation. It is as we are able to identify with the oil-soaked shorebird and the bewildered moose and the stranded polar bear that they come to embody our environmental concerns. And accompanying our sense of compassion, often at variance with our self-focused aims, is our haunting sense that things should be fair. So in chapter 9 on sex, I go through what probably put many of you to sleep in your biology classes, all about meiosis and Mendel and all of that stuff. But I try to make it interesting. And I then reflect on it as follows. We have thus far considered two ways to think about caring for others. We have acknowledged our deep genetic homology with all of life, and the affinity, the fellowship that emerges from that knowledge. We have also celebrated our capacity to experience empathy with other creatures and respond to their concerns as our own. And now, in thinking about sex, we encounter our biological imperative, sacrificing, if need be, our lives on their behalf. It seems likely that the emotions evoked when we absorb our evolutionary affinity with other creatures, and when we are infused with compassion, will turn out to map closely onto the pathways that drive our basal, parental, and nurturing instincts. Emotions that generate such feelings as tenderness and warmth and protectiveness. These same emotions extend to our understanding that the earth, the planetary matrix, must be nurtured as well. Intimacy. So a consequence of our nurturance of our young and our relationships with our mates, this wonderful capacity for intimacy has evolved not only in us, but also, for example, in these wonderful birds who the father and mother stay connected for life and also nurture their little baby. Given the complications of human-style intimacy, an enormous attraction of the theistic religions has been that they offer the opportunity for intimate relationship with a deity or deities. Indeed, they often suggest that the most stable and fruitful outlets for intimacy is with the divine. These relationships can be abstract, as in indigenous prayers to cosmic concepts like the Great Spirit or the Earth Mother, or they can be intensely personal, as in the devotion accorded to Krishna in some Hindu traditions. But in the end, such faith isn't available to me. I can't go there. I lack the resources to render my capacity for love and my need to be loved to supernatural beings. And so I have no choice but to pour these capacities and needs into thick relationships with human and non-human beings, fragile and mortal and difficult as they can sometimes be. Earthly intimacy is a gift. It fills our lives with experiences of loving and being loved in all sorts of beautiful and fulfilling ways. So in this chapter, I talk about death, and I start by pointing out that most creatures on the planet do not have death as a necessary part of their life cycle. A single cell bacterium can divide into 2 and then into 4, into 8, and none of them have to die. They can, of course, die. They can starve or be boiled, or they're not immortal in that sense. But death isn't part of their life cycle. And I then explain that in multicellular organisms, where we're looking here at land plants, that the plan is to have 2 kinds of cells in the body. Some are called the somatic cells that make the leaves and the fruits and the flowers, and the other are the germline cells, the eggs and the sperm, and they are entrusted with the job of continuing to the next generation. And this allows the somatic cells, since they can differentiate into anything, they don't have any constraints on needing to be germ cells. They can differentiate into just about everything you can think of. All the animal and plant tissues that we marvel at are part of the soma. And that, of course, includes our brains. So our brains, and hence our minds, are destined to die with the rest of the soma. They aren't needed to continue. And it is here that we arrive at one of the central ironies of human existence, which is that our sentient brains are capable of experiencing deep regret and sorrow and fear at the prospect of our own deaths. Yet it was the invention of death, the invention of the germ-soma dichotomy, that make possible the existence of our brains. Sex without death gets you single-celled algae and fungi and protists. Sex with a mortal soma gets you the rest of the eukaryotic creatures. Death is the price paid to have oaks and clams and geese and grasshoppers. And death is the price paid to have human-style consciousness, to be aware of all that shimmering awareness and all that love. My somatic life is the wondrous gift wrought by my forthcoming death. Human evolution, we're almost done. Human evolution has, in the last, since I wrote the first edition, we've learned huge amounts about what happened. But basically the scheme is the same. Starting at the bottom, we have the common ancestor to all the great apes about 15 million years ago. And then as we move to the left, the gorillas branch off at about 12 million years ago. And about 7 years ago, the hominid line branches off. And then about 3 million years ago, there are 2 kinds of chimpanzees, the common chimpanzee and the bonobo, that diverged at that time. The dotted line represents the common ancestor to the humans and the chimps. And this common ancestor then evolved to form the modern human, with many hominins along the way, Australopithecus and so on, to get to our current form. The multiple human migrations out of Africa began only 100,000 years ago, and the European migrations only 54,000 years ago. And those migrants were all fully Pan-African. Psychologist Jeffrey Miller says it well. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. All of the significant evolution in our species occurred in populations with brown and black skins living in Africa. At the beginning of hominin evolution 7 million years ago, our ape-like ancestors had dark skins just like chimps and gorillas. When modern Homo sapiens showed up 300,000 years ago, we still had dark skins. When brain sizes tripled, they tripled in Africans. When sexual choice shaped human nature, it shaped Africans. When language, music, and art evolved, they evolved in Africans. Lighter skins evolved in some European and Asian populations long after the human mind evolved its present capacities. Afrocentrism is an appropriate attitude to take when we are thinking about human evolution. Our fully shared, fully ligated humanity, our deep kinship, is a foundational concept, and when absorbed, potent counterforce to systemic and structural racism. And in the final chapter, I talk about morality and then eco-morality, where this image with this little man that someone has built, or human, I guess could be a female, this human looking out at the river is a wonderful image for me to denote where our presence should be with respect to the rest of what is. So I talk about morality and virtues, and then talk about these virtues as they apply to being eco-moral, and conclude with the Senegalese conservationist Baba Diom saying the following: in the end, we will conserve only what we love, and we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. We have lifted up earlier our deep inborn affinity with the natural world. Baba Diom calls us to interweave this sensibility with our deepening knowledge of the natural world, creating narratives and teachings that help all of us understand what it is that we love, and to then insist that its sacred presence be conserved for future generations. This leads me to what I start out the book with and end the book with, the concept that there could be a planetary ethos rooted in everybody's story, which is not dissimilar to the kinds of things that people are thinking about in terms of the noosphere. And Gail suggested that I closed with something, and I wrote a version of the Lord's Prayer that I'm going to read at the end. The Mother Nature's Prayer.
Wonderful.
Our Mother, who art within us, hallowed be thy name. Thy ways evolve.
Mhm.
Thy will calls forth this earth that is now our heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and fill us with tenderness as we repair our trespasses. And lead us not into destruction, but deliver us into harmony. For thine is our wellspring, and our grounding, and our glory forever and ever. Amen.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, very beautiful. Whole presentation is so inspiring.
Well, thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you so much.
So, oh, good. We've got lots of time. I gather we have till 5:30. So let's go. I guess you put up your virtual hand and Bob somehow performs his
Oh.
magic and we have conversations.
Absolutely. And to start with, we have Cece Ford. Let me pull you up on the screen here. There we go, Cece.
Yeah,
Hi.
thank you so much. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
heard I was rapt by your lecture, and I took your invitation to look only when there was an image
Mhm.
and just listen with my eyes closed to your words. And I was particularly struck by the notion of emergence and agency and purpose. And I will say that I feel really a lot of grief about the climate and the human influence, like obvious cause of the climate change that we're now in the middle of mass extinction. And I don't know, there's something about purpose and agency and emergence that I'm confused about. And maybe it's that I feel too much like there's a dilemma in between. I don't know if you're getting it already, but if we have agency, then we should do something. And if we're in the middle of emergence, which I've seen throughout my life, that human nature, from the time I was born in 1954, I witnessed, I lived in Europe and the Middle East and witnessed like horrendous things that were evidence of human destruction. And so I don't know.
Yeah. So
Take it where you will.
I mean, I encourage you to go ahead and get my book. You can get it at the library if you don't want to buy it. But there's I of course developed this a lot more than I was able to do in these few short paragraphs.
I guess I'm asking, should I be an agent to stop climate change,
Of
or
course,
should
we all
I
should. I mean,
just
that's
be beautiful and let it
no.
emerge
So
because
the whole
it's human emergence?
the whole eco morality thing comes. We are social beings, so we are as social beings, we are inherently concerned about relationships. So that's in our being. We have social emotions. We know what we're supposed to be doing, and the problem is that these can be hijacked by fear and greed. And so what all of us who are in this forum, and I hope an increasing number of people, particularly young people around the world, start to understand, is that the aggression and the negative things that we know how to do and we get sucked into are not necessary, they are not part of our basic nature, but they are something that we have gotten pulled into by a variety of historical events. But the bonobos don't kill each other. and they're too few of them to pollute the earth, but there are lots of us. So there are lots of things we have to do, but I don't think that we lack the ability to get things back on track. I'm actually optimistic that we can do it, but we have to talk about it all day long, and we have to join groups that are cleaning up rivers, and we have to give money to groups that are trying to restore peace and justice to the planet. And there's just a lot of things we have to do to get there.
Right. Thank you. Victoria Martino, we're not seeing you and you're muted, so at least unmute yourself, please. Victoria, are you with us? You're muted. There's an unmute button in the lower left corner of your screen. There you go.
There you go.
Okay. Can you see me?
Well, it just has your name, and your image isn't showing.
Oh,
So
okay. This is the first time that I'm trying to do something on my phone.
okay.
I'm driving to an appointment, and I've never done this before. Usually I'm on at home with my laptop. So sorry, I apologize, but this was so fascinating. I had to try to bring you with me.
We'll imagine you.
Thank you. I would love to continue this conversation indefinitely, but for now, what I have a million questions, but I would say for now, maybe it will answer some of the issues I have. I'm a professional musician by that's my career, and I'm a violinist, and my whole life trajectory has been inspired by Mozart. That's why I became a musician. So I was totally delighted that you chose Mozart, a Mozart sonata. I wish you'd chosen one of the violin sonatas. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I'm for me the resistance, I guess, to a non-theistic worldview is in fact what I do for a living. It's going inside the mind of Mozart. I have a Mozart marathon that's all the violin sonatas in one continuous concert without intermission. It's 9 hours long. And what I've experienced and what audience members have experienced is something that I just can't think of any other way to describe it or define it than something that is inspired in the sense, like you write in your book about the terms soul and spirit. And I just I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about like the Mozart missing link according to your view of the the evolution of our species.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by Mozart missing links.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to be poetic. I guess it was it went flat. What I mean is that because I've also studied evolutionary biology with E.O. Wilson, and he tried to stretch beyond his field in a way very similar to what you're doing, and I find it really fascinating. But I always stop short at art in its highest form. I mean, any of the arts, whether it's poetry or, but particularly for me, music is. And so, I feel like
short in what way? I'm sorry.
I stop short in the sense that I just feel like I can't, in my own mind, find any explanation for the arts in their highest manifestation that isn't predicated on a theistic belief.
I see. So the arts then for you somehow come from God? Is that a way of putting it?
To put it simply, yeah. I mean, what I loved about your talk was the mystery. And so for me, the mystery I thought of in terms of the apophatic theological tradition of saying, whatever God is or whoever God is, we can't define anyway. It's an eternal mystery. So that leaves it more open-ended than just, a man in his white beard sitting on a chair.
Absolutely. So in writing the book and writing about religious, I felt it was, and I kind of sidestepped this in the first edition, and people faulted me for it correctly. So I've gone ahead and said that the even an apathetic, mystery God, something or other, doesn't work for me. I just, I see music as something that emerges from these wonderful minds that we humans have, and we, of course, get great inspiration from listening to birdsong, and music is made by other creatures as well. But I see it as part of these incredible minds that we have, for which I am always blessed, and don't feel the need to have to go further. But I am very, very emphatic in that this is me, and that I realize that there are billions of people that think about it differently.
Of course, yeah, and I respect that completely. Yeah, I think your argument is very eloquent. Well, I'll give time for other people to ask, but the Mozart was really what
it's not an argument as much as a confession, I guess. But anyway, that's where I land and always have.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
Great, thanks, Victoria. Sir Mead, welcome.
Thank you. Ursula, I have to first say that your non-theistic theology, which is, if you allow me the contradiction here, is enthralling. It's wonderful. It makes so much sense to me in so many different ways. There's one thing that I find very difficult to understand, and that is, you mentioned the improbabilistic nature of evolution, and that is, of course, the source of all the mystery, the awe, and the wonder. But I wonder if the improbabilistic aspect of evolution is also an indication of some kind of intentionality. On the one hand, we have the possibility of complete randomness, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense when I think about how things have evolved, how we human beings have evolved. And I wonder, how do you justify that without, and I don't necessarily mean a God here at all, I'm just saying that there's some kind of an intentionality that must be working through our universe to create such an improbabilistic place that we have here.
Well, I use improbable, but obviously it's not impossible because it happened.
Yes.
All right. And
yes.
So given that it happened, we scientists who are wondering, for example, about the origin of life, are building models like the one I proposed that indicate how something like this could have happened using laws of physics and chemistry, not adding anything to the mix, and have come up with ways that this could happen. Now, I'm hoping that there will at some point be funding for scientists to do experiments in the lab where they might actually see if they can create an autocatalytic cycle using, various molecules. And that would happen by intent. So that's how we usually think that something happens, is that humans want to build something and they add what they think should be there. But all of the ingredients for having this happen, the chemical environment of those hydrothermal vents, for example, make it improbable but not impossible. And since it clearly did happen, here's all this life. Something that was improbable did happen. Does that work?
If you allow me a little bit of follow-up here.
Sure.
I'm actually a physicist, and so one of the things that I am aware of is what's called the fine-tuning principle.
Yeah.
If we look at the laws of physics and there are many things that we call constants in those laws. And those constants seem to be so finely tuned to be just the right numbers so that the universe that they create has the possibility of life to emerge. Do you have
Okay.
anything to say about that?
Well, sure. So, I mean, the fine tuning thing has been around since I got into thinking about all of this. The easy way out is to say that there are many universes, and each one of them has
Yes.
different laws.
Yes.
And if you have enough universes, a few of them are going to have the right
Yes. Yes, I know
spin
that.
on the electron to get it to work. And so that's the easy way. The other way that the fine tuning leaves me cold is that what the alternative is that there's some mind, something, however apathetically you want to investigate it, that was thinking about what the charge and the spin on an electron were. And I can't imagine, I mean, I can't go there. I that doesn't do anything for me. So in the end, the fact that the universe is fine tuned joins, the list of mysteries,
Yes.
that there an answer isn't available and may never be available. And the fine tuning can be used to argue that there is an ultimate creator of all things, or it can be said to be a particular facet of our particular universe that it turned out that way, or it can be mystery.
Thank you. I accept that answer. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Gail, yes, you have your hand up.
Well, Dr. Goodenough, I wondered
Ursula.
what you do with the space in between people. The consciousness for me is not just in my own brain, but it's also being aware and somehow connected to other people. So it's the old story about you think about somebody and then they come around the corner. You people have the same idea at the same time. There seems to be a communal experience that's beyond matter. That's what it seems like to me.
You're talking about like panpsychism, kind of?
I don't know that word.
Oh,
I don't know.
There's a school of thought called panpsychism that says that consciousness is in everything, even in subatomic particles, some people go. And that as life complexified, this psychic ability developed into its current forms. But maybe that's not. Are you talking about? But you're talking about the fact that you were thinking about your uncle and then he called on the telephone. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Kind of thing. And also the one with the Mozart, the people could each have their own heart touched by music, but there's also something that happens in the room sometimes where everybody seems to be in the same bubble.
Yeah. So that isn't mysterious to me. That's just that we're all grooving on Mozart together. I mean, I don't see that is hard to explain, but tell me why you find it hard to explain if you do. I mean, if we're all, if we're all looking at the solar eclipse, and everybody's going, yeah, of course.
Well, I was just singing Sunday with a friend, a chant at the beginning of a worship service. And the whole room seemed to be filled with this connection, so that everybody was a community. We were all a community together. And so I think about it in those terms, as far as what I would call spiritual terms, or consciousness, where there is between people often, hopefully, sought after experiences of oneness. Let's try the word oneness. How do you feel about that?
Intimacy. I mean, there are all sorts of spiritual experiences that we have. I'll use the term intimacy. I think there's an intimacy in that oneness that happens around a campfire, or in a drumming circle. There are lots of ways that our minds connect. And I often have connections with, I happen to have cats, and cats aren't very social or anything, but I get the feeling sometimes that my cat and I are locked in. But to me, that's just a gift that intimacy and our capacity for intimacy allows us to experience. That doesn't move me to think that there are immaterial spirits that somehow move into the church or the drum circle. But of course, many people do go there. So I'm not saying that that's not another way to think about it, but it's not needed for me. That's all I can do.
Well, just to be clear, I wasn't thinking there's spirits in between.
Oh, you were, okay.
No. I think of it
Well,
as
many people do.
yeah. Looking for a word for their experience.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll stop because we have Margaret has something to ask.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Time for one last question here. Yep. Sorry, give me 1 second. Margaret, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just regret that I didn't see the whole talk, and I hope there will be a recording. But yeah, I wanted to mention, thank you, Dr. Goodenough. This was just amazing. I have a physicist friend who we're both very much into synchronicity. And I also wanted to tell you, because I'm excited about it, relating to Submeet and Victoria, the same physicist friend, Michael Albro, he might know the name, is involved in bringing together music and the cosmos at Fermilab here, and they're going to be portraying, would you believe, Mozart's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with the whole panorama that they're going to present, and that's going to be in a couple of years' time with the Chicago Sinfonietta. So I just wanted to pass that on because I'm excited about it. Thank you so much.
I'll look for it.
Good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Penny, I believe you might have some words to bring us to a close. Let me bring you on board here.
Well, thank you so much, Ursula. This was amazing.
Thank you.
It was amazing. Just amazing. Thank you.
John Robinson has a poem to send us out that I think is kind of aligned with what we've been hearing, and synchronicity is afloat. So it's called Beyond the Creation Story. The divine world is fashioned by the stories we tell. It's called creation because we're here to create too. But addiction to drama, vanity, and grandiosity commandeer our storytelling. We build the world of man instead of heaven on earth. We are craftsmen of divinity, yet lose sight of creation. We need to tell sacred stories instead. As more people awaken, our stories will arise from ecstasy and love. And then the next stage in this divine story will begin.
Lovely. Who is the poet?
John Robinson. He's a mystic writer and also an aging specialist who used to be part of our team and who has gone on to write poetry now.
Good.
So thank you so much. Wow.
We have a tradition of people taking themselves off mute and saying thank you into your microphone so Ursula can hear how many of us were listening to her the whole time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Goodenough. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodenough. Thank you so much.
So welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. I know.
Beautiful pulling together, beautiful education.
Much. Bye.
Oh, thank you.
Look at you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all. That brings us to a close for today.
Thank you.
We'll see many of you in a month, we hope.
Okay.
I'll be checking in.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Wonderful.
And
Good.
And the slides.
I hope we will be able to see the slides because some of
I
that.
think I got a thing
Oh.
saying that it was recorded, so,
Yes,
right, Gail?
we've
Yeah.
recorded it. We'll post it where we always post them on the YouTube channel for Creation Spirituality Communities.
Right.
There's a playlist there called Global Kinship. So
Could
can
you
always
send
find
me,
it.
could you send me the link so I don't miss it? I'm sure I can find it. but
Yeah,
I-
sure. I'll
Okay.
be able to send it to you.
Thank
And
you so
the-
much.
And the Lord's Prayer, please.
That was
It will be
Other
on
than-
it will be on
And
the
John Robinson's prayer
Yes.
or poem.
Okay.
all of them will
Thank
be
you.
there. If
It's
you
all
just
part
go
of
to
the-
the mailer that I sent you, you will find a place where it says click here and it'll take you straight to them. Just find it.
Good.
That I
Good.
Super.
sent
Thank
today,
you.
Take care.
twice by
Good
mistake.
night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye-bye.